Hey everyone, Kumar Data Train here with Glenn Marshall, and we are back for another episode of our XSCALE series. And in this video, what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit more, a little deeper about triple loop learning, the L in XSCALE. And we thought it deserved a little bit more attention because really the L is such an integral part of the XSCALE call it framework, call it set of patterns, whatever it is. And also, Peter Merrill, the founder of XSCALE, the creator of XSCALE, provided some really valuable feedback on the last video that we recorded that we tended to gloss over some of the salient points of triple loop learning that we aim to rectify in this video, which is what we're going to do here over the next 10 or 15 minutes. Here, let me turn this light on there so I can be a little brighter. So Glenn, what do you say? Maybe a little redo?
I think that's something we should take care of. Definitely.
All right. So where do we start?
Well, you were saying something off camera here that I thought was interesting. You've got some experience in the restaurant industry that we could perhaps use as an example.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable. Maybe put it in terms that people can more easily understand. So before I was in my current profession as an agile coach, professional coach, I used to run restaurants a lifetime ago. And one of my first, my first restaurant was, I'm going to say it, I was 18 years old, and me and my good buddy, Roddy Vargas, I don't know if you're watching, and another good buddy who I can't remember, Dave Elliott. The three of us went into partnership and opened a deli, and we called it Psychedeli. And it was just a small little operation. We just served lunch, basically. We rented a kitchen in the back of someone's restaurant, and they didn't use it during the day. And so we bought a refrigerator and bought some equipment, and we made sandwiches and salads and so on and so forth. And we were talking about this, Glenn and I, and it seemed very analogous to that first loop, learning loop in the triple loop learning, which is about improving the flow of work within a team, right? We were a small team, just three of us, and all we did was prepare lunch. And so for us, it was about becoming as efficient as we could possibly be in the 4 hours or so that we worked every day during the week to make and deliver lunch to the office buildings around in that area. What do you think, Glenn? Does that seem like a good analogy?
I think it does. So the key point here is it was just one team. You went in, you did your stuff, and then you went away. That's it.
Right. It was really about improving the flow of work. So we had clear criteria for what made a good sandwich or a good salad. And it was about trying to remove all possible sources of waste in our small little kitchen that we rented. Right, so having good proximity to from the refrigerator to the cutting board where we cut our sandwich rolls, and the slicer where we sliced our meats, and all of the different things we did. We had a panini press where we made paninis and things like that. But the positioning of the equipment so that the work flowed unimpeded, right, and so it was available quickly for delivery. So one of us would deliver, one of us would cook, and one of us would sort of float around and help each other. And because we were a small team, we didn't need a lot of overhead, right? So we were able to do this efficiently, just the three of us.
Okay. I think that's a great example of working as a team. But I believe you also said that you had worked in a bit of a bigger operation where you were running multi-shifts, and you were doing full service, you were doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right, so yeah, if we get to the next level, so this was one team, and we were maximizing the flow of work. If you look at the second learning loop, it's really about maximizing the flow of value. You could argue that in our little Psychedeli, our little deli, we were also maximizing the flow of value. But the analogy that we want to talk about is really the next level of restaurant that I used to run, which was kind of a small breakfast cafe, and it was multiple shifts, right? So we had a early morning shift, and we had a sort of a late morning shift, and so it required coordination between shifts.
So you had multiple teams then.
We had multiple teams, exactly. And so these teams had to coordinate and share learning between each team.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I could take the analogy further. I ran, of course, full service restaurants as well, and we had 3 shifts there. So we had 3 teams that coordinate. You know, each team had line cooks and prep cooks and dishwashers and bus boys and girls and wait staff and food runners, and you know, you name it, all these different people that were required to serve our customer, our clients, right? And these teams had to work well within the team, you know, the flow of work, but also the flow of value was very important, that customers received what they ordered. It was of good quality. They spoke well of us and hopefully got other people to come and taste our food and so on and so forth. And so these teams have to coordinate between each other, in between shifts.
And there's this notion of a value stream where the prep folks do the prep work and then they pass it on to the line folks. So it's not just one team all working at the same time. There's definitely a flow here.
Exactly. It's a flow. It's a flow of work and a flow of values. So the prep cooks have to prep the right stuff in the right quantities, right? And they have to be ready at the right time for the line cooks to be able to use what they prepped. I worked in the steakhouse for a long time, and they delivered sort of a side of beef, and we had meat cutters in-house that would process that side of beef into the various cuts. And I remember the line cooks and the meat cutter would get together every day and talk about the cuts of meat that were ready, and the line cooks would give suggestions to the meat cutter on the thickness and so on and so forth, and the grain, and provide some feedback. And this is how learning happens, right? Within a restaurant, certainly, but also, you know, you can take the analogy outside of restaurants. This is what should happen if you run an IT shop and you have developers and analysts and so on. They should be talking to each other.
You should,
like people do in restaurants.
I think the restaurant analogy is still useful, though, because I believe you were saying that one of your restaurants was a franchise.
Yeah, I did work in a franchise, a franchisee with 5 restaurants.
Okay, so that's like a portfolio.
It's like a portfolio, exactly. And the third learning flow is really about the flow of value between streams of work, right? So if you think of the 5 restaurants, it's the flow of value that each produces. And of course, how do the streams communicate with each other, right? For the mutual benefit of the entire, in this case, restaurant operation.
And that's a bit challenging in a franchise. Is one franchise talking to one franchise location talking to another? I have a funny feeling that didn't happen. But what should have happened if this was optimal and following the model here?
Right. So in my experience, right, the franchise owner incentivized us managers. I was a GM for one of the locations at the time. We were rewarded on the amount of sales we generated and the amount of profits we generated. So both on the top line, but more importantly on the bottom line, what was a profit? What was our profitability? And so we competed against each other. And it wasn't that these franchise locations were all that far from each other. We literally competed with each other for this, in some cases, overlapping pools of customers.
A zero-sum game.
It certainly was, right?
I think it's some missed optimization there.
What should happen, Glenn, in a situation like that?
You want to go and optimize the streams across the portfolios. You need the portfolios to communicate to one another. What if you had, it's a franchise, you're a bit constrained, but what if you come up with some clever way of improving the speed at which you prepared the product, whatever it was you were selling? That should be shared to the other locations so they could go in and have the same optimization and perhaps share one back to you. So everybody wins. But instead you were competing with each other. So all that knowledge was kept secret and the learnings weren't shared.
Exactly. And that's I would say to a certain extent that did happen in the franchise that I worked for. But I again, this was many years ago, many decades ago, actually. But I do remember a very in some ways unhealthy competition between the franchise general managers, me being one of them. And I remember winning the sales competition several years in a row, and you know, I don't know. I don't know how much that contributed overall to the franchise as a whole, the growth, right? In fact, some of the restaurants were doing quite poorly. And so I think a better strategy would be to incentivize us managers, us general managers, to help each other for the mutual benefit of each other. So we raise all boats, all ships, right? All the restaurants are running at a much better pace, and that would have, of course, made the franchise owner a lot more money. But more importantly, each of the GMs would be invested in a different set of rewards that the franchise owner would have, if he had been more, you know, sort of had more forethought, would have been a better way to make a profit.
And you would be able to optimize the portfolio. As it stands now, you're only optimizing the stream, and you missed out on the portfolio because of the reward system, which is
exactly. Yeah.
But we see this in IT organizations as well. We see this in corporate organizations where there isn't that sharing. Each of these streams becomes a silo.
That's right. Yeah, it's a flawed model, right? So because people are rewarded for optimizing their part of the value stream, or their value stream, if it is a big enough value stream. It's really they're part of the value stream. And so what that does is it sub-optimizes other parts of the value stream, of the flow of value to the customer. And it's you know, that's where triple loop learning is so important. And first, you know, thanks Peter for pointing out some of what we skipped over in the last video. I don't think anything we said was wrong per se, but I think we skipped over some of these really salient points, that what the essence of triple loop learning, right? So the flow of work within a team, the flow of value, what's delivered to the customer, and then the flow of learning between streams, between teams, if you will, is so important to the success of an organization.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of value at the portfolio level, and I think that is one that organizations typically miss. And
that's right.
And we will be talking more about that.
Yeah, so I think maybe the next thing we ought to do, which is what we're supposed to do today, is talk about the Camelot model. The Camelot model being something that manifests these the triple loop learning in a way that that we haven't really seen with other models like Scrum or whatever. And you know, besides triple loop learning, certainly Camelot model uses other patterns in the XSCALE set of patterns like leadership as a service and DRIs and things like that. I wouldn't say complicated, but it's hard to grasp at first. And I know in the last video we shared a link to the Camelot model. So what do you say, Glenn? Do you want to sort of dive into it in this video, or save that for the next time we meet?
We wanted to keep these to 15 minutes, and we're kind of getting up there in time. So I would suggest that we leave that till next time. But if people are interested, they could look at the Camelot video, but we're going to break it down and do it in multiple parts. And we're really getting into the juice of XSCALE here. This is kind of the unique value add for XSCALE, looking at the enterprise writ large and how you descale it and simplify it. So stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good call out, because we're already at 14 minutes. So just in summary, think of the triple loop learning as optimizing the work within a team, right? That's the first learning loop, if you will. So ensuring that you have what you need to deliver something within the team. So you know, in the case of a restaurant, you know, maybe we don't have enough prep cooks, and so things get bogged down. The line cooks don't have enough to cook because there's not enough steaks to put on the grill. And so it's adding a prep cook so that the line cook has what they need. So optimizing the flow of work, right? So the learning there is add more people, I guess, in this case. The second loop is maximizing the flow of value. So you may have all the people you want, but if they're not organized properly or effectively, then you have a lot of waste in the system. Then the restaurant loses customers, because clients, the customers that come in, the food is delayed, or it's overcooked or undercooked or whatever it might be, right? So you're maximizing the flow of value. So the learning that takes place there. Glenn?
And I think the key point there is that you have multiple separate teams that have to coordinate with each other in a value stream.
That's bingo, exactly. And so it's a coordination of this, and how does learning flow between these teams, between the front of the house staff, the middle of the house, if you will, the people that run the food out and so on, and the managers, and the back of the house, the people in the kitchen, the prep cooks and all that. How do they sharing information and sharing it well? And then finally, it's maximizing the value between streams. So in the example we used, a franchise owner with 5 restaurants, which I was one of the GM for one. And the way this franchise owner incentivized us was flawed because it created competition between the streams rather than cooperation for mutual gain and benefit.
Yes, cooperation, the key phrase.
Right. All right. I think I'm happy with our explanation of triple loop. How about you, Glenn?
I think we got it.
All right.
Hope Peter's satisfied this time.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, great. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in a couple of weeks with, a explanation on Camelot and how it manifests this and other patterns in the XScale framework. Thanks for watching.